The stars had always been beautiful from Seoul. Tae remembered watching them as a child, sitting on the roof of his grandmother's house, wondering if anyone was looking back. Now, at 28 years old, he stood on the observation deck of the Korean Air Force Base and watched those same stars disappear behind something massive and dark. The ships came without warning. One moment, the night sky was clear. The next moment, shadows blocked out the moon. Tae counted 12 vessels, each one larger than any building he had ever seen. They hung in the air like mountains that had learned to fly. His radio crackled to life. All pilots report to briefing room immediately. Tae ran. His boots hit the ground hard as he crossed the base. Other pilots joined him, their faces pale with fear and confusion. Nobody spoke. What could anyone say? The thing they had always wondered about, the question humanity had asked for thousands of years, had just been answered in the worst possible way. They were not alone. And whatever had come to visit them did not come in peace. The briefing room was chaos. Officers shouted at each other. Screens showed images from around the world. The ships had appeared everywhere at the same time. New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, Sydney. Every major city on Earth now had visitors from the stars. General Wu stood at the front of the room. He was an old man with white hair and a face made of stone. Tae had served under him for 3 years and had never seen him show fear. Tonight, for just a moment, Tae saw something flicker in those old eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by the same hard determination that had carried Wu through 40 years of military service. "Listen to me," Wu said. His voice cut through the noise like a blade. Everyone fell silent. "We have received a transmission. It is in Korean, English, Chinese, and every other language on Earth. The translation technology alone tells us these beings are far more advanced than us." He pressed a button. A voice filled the room. It was smooth and cold, like ice sliding across glass. "People of Earth, I am Admiral Dravok of the Velthari Empire. Your planet has been selected for integration into our great civilization. You have 1 hour to surrender all military assets and governmental control to our forces. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your species. This is not a negotiation. This is a notification. Your hour begins now." The message ended. Silence filled the room. Tae felt his heart beating fast. 1 hour. They had 1 hour to decide the fate of humanity. He thought about his sister Hana, who lived in an apartment near the base. He thought about his parents in Bazan. He thought about every person he had ever known, every street he had ever walked, every meal he had ever eaten. All of it, everything that made life worth living, could end in 60 minutes. "What are our orders, sir?" Someone asked. General Wu looked at the young officer who had spoken. Then he looked at everyone else in the room. His eyes moved from face to face, and Tae felt the weight of that gaze when it landed on him. "I cannot tell you what to do," Wu said. "I can only tell you what I will do. I was born on this planet. I raised my children on this planet. I buried my wife on this planet. No creature from the stars will take it from me. Not today. Not ever." He straightened his back. "I will fight. Anyone who wishes to stand with me, stay. Anyone who wishes to leave, go now. There will be no shame in protecting your families." Nobody moved. Wu nodded slowly. "Then let us prepare." Across the city, Hana was already moving. She had seen the ships from her window. She had heard the message on her radio. While others ran through the streets in panic, she walked calmly to her closet and pulled out an old military bag. Inside were supplies she had packed years ago, just in case. Water, food, medicine, a knife. A flashlight. She was not a soldier like her brother. She was a history teacher at a middle school. But she had always known that peace was temporary. History had taught her that. Empires rose and fell. Invasions came and went. The people who survived were not always the strongest. They were the ones who prepared. Her phone rang. It was Tay. Are you safe? He asked. I am leaving my apartment now. Where should I go? The base is too dangerous. Go to the old shelter near grandmother's house. Do you remember it? Hana remembered. During the war, decades ago, their grandmother had hidden in that shelter. She had survived bombs and fire and hunger. She had lived to tell her grandchildren about it, to teach them that survival was possible, even when everything seemed lost. I remember, Hana said. What about you? I have to stay. I have to fight. Tay, I know what you want to say, but I cannot run. If everyone runs, there will be nowhere left to run to. Hana closed her eyes. She wanted to argue. She wanted to beg him to come with her, to hide, to live. But she knew her brother. She knew the fire that burned inside him. It was the same fire that had driven their grandmother to survive, the same fire that had built their nation from ashes after the war. Then fight well, she said, and come back to me. I will try. The call ended. Hana picked up her bag and walked out the door. On the ships above, Admiral Dravok watched the planet below. His viewing screen showed images from thousands of cameras his forces had deployed. He could see the chaos in the streets. He could see the military bases preparing for battle. He could see the fear. It was always the same. Every planet they conquered reacted the same way. First came denial, then fear, then finally surrender. The Valkyrie Empire had brought 300 worlds into its control. Not one had successfully resisted. Not one had even come close. Admiral, said his second officer, a tall female named Vesa, the humans are not responding to our demand for surrender. They will, Dravok said. They always do. Give them time to understand their situation. Our scans show their military capabilities. They have nuclear weapons. Dravok laughed. It was a cold sound, like rocks falling down a cliff. Nuclear weapons. How primitive. Our shields can absorb 1,000 of their bombs without strain. Their rockets will not even reach us. Should we demonstrate our power? Destroy one of their cities to encourage cooperation? Dravok considered this. It was standard procedure. Show the target species what happened to those who resisted. Usually, one city was enough. Sometimes two. The Valkyrie had destroyed entire continents before, when species proved especially stubborn. But that was wasteful. Dead populations could not work. Dead planets could not produce resources. Not yet, he decided. Let them exhaust themselves with their little resistance. When they see how useless their weapons are, they will beg to serve us. It is better that way. Fear makes obedient servants. Back on the ground, Tay climbed into his fighter jet. The cockpit closed around him like a shell. He checked his weapons, missiles, guns. Everything was ready. Everything was useless against those massive ships. He knew that. Everyone knew that, but they were going to try anyway. All pilots, came General Wu's voice over the radio. The hour is almost over. The aliens expect us to surrender. They expect us to bow down and accept our fate. They have conquered hundreds of worlds. They think we will be easy. A pause. They are wrong. We are human. We do not kneel. We do not break. We fight until our last breath, and then we fight some more. Today, we show the galaxy what Earth is made of. Today, we make them remember our name. The timer reached 0.dr. Avoke watched his screen. He waited for the white flags. He waited for the messages of surrender. He waited for the humans to accept reality. Instead, he saw fire. Missiles rose from every continent. Thousands of them, streaming up toward his fleet like angry stars. Fighter jets launched from bases around the world. Ships sailed into position in every ocean. Soldiers took defensive positions in every city. The humans were not surrendering. They were attacking. Impossible, Vesa whispered. Dradok stared at the screen. In 300 conquests, this had never happened. No species had ever chosen war against the Velthari. The mathematics were too clear. The power difference was too great. Fighting was suicide, yet the humans fought. The first missiles reached the fleet. They exploded against the shields, exactly as Dravok had predicted. No damage, not even a scratch. The shields absorbed everything and asked for more, but the humans kept firing. More missiles, more jets, more ships. They threw everything they had against the invaders, knowing it would fail, refusing to stop. Tay flew toward the nearest ship. His targeting system screamed warnings at him. His missiles would do nothing. His guns would do nothing. He was flying toward his death. He did not turn back. For Earth, he said, and pressed the trigger. His missiles flew true. They hit the shield and vanished in light. The alien ship did not even notice. It was like a giant ignoring an insect, but Tay was still alive. And while he lived, he would fight. Around the world, millions of others made the same choice. Soldiers who knew they could not win. Citizens who had never held a weapon before. Old people and young people. Men and women. All of them standing up. All of them refusing to kneel. Admiral Dravok watched the chaos below. For the first time in his long career, he felt something strange. It was not fear. The Velthari did not feel fear. It was something else. Something he could not name. Begin the counterattack, he ordered. Teach these humans the price of resistance. The war for Earth had begun. The Velthari counterattack came like a storm made of light. Beams of energy shot down from the ships above, cutting through the night sky with terrible beauty. Buildings exploded. Streets turned to glass. Thousands died in seconds. Tay watched a beam strike the ground 3 kilometers away. The flash was so bright it hurt his eyes even through his helmet. When his vision cleared, he saw a crater where a neighborhood used to be. Homes and shops and schools, all gone. Turned to dust by a weapon he could not even understand. His radio filled with screams. Pilots calling for help. Pilots saying goodbye. Pilots dying mid-sentence, their words cut off by fire from above. Stay focused, General Wu commanded. Find patterns in their attacks. Learn, adapt, survive. Tay forced himself to breathe. Panic would kill him faster than any alien weapon. He needed to think. He needed to observe. He needed to find something, anything, that could help. The Velthari beams were powerful, but they were not instant. He watched one ship charge its weapon, saw the glow building at its base for nearly 3 seconds before it fired. 3 seconds. That was enough time to move. Not much, but enough. All pilots, listen to me, Tay said into his radio. Watch the ships. Their weapons need time to charge. You can see the glow before they fire. When you see it, move. Do not fly in straight lines. Keep changing direction. Make them waste their shots. Some pilots heard him. They started weaving through the sky, dancing between beams of death. Others were too slow, too scared, too tired. They fell like burning stars, but some survived. And those survivors learned. On the ground, General Wu coordinated the defense from a bunker deep beneath the base. Screens showed him feeds from around the world. Every continent was burning. Every nation was fighting. The death toll was already in the millions, and the battle had only been going for 30 minutes. Sir, we are receiving reports from other commands, an officer said. The aliens are focusing on military targets. They have not attacked civilian areas unless provoked. Wu nodded slowly. This made sense. A conquering empire wanted slaves, not corpses. They were trying to break Earth's ability to fight without destroying the population they wanted to control. Spread the word, Wu ordered. Tell civilians to stay hidden. Do not provoke the aliens directly. Let our military forces draw their attention. And our military forces, sir? What do we do? Wu looked at the screens. His pilots were dying. His soldiers were dying. His country was burning. But they were not surrendering. They were not running away. They were standing and fighting, just as he had asked them to do. We keep fighting, he said, and we pray for a miracle. Hana reached the old shelter as dawn began to break. The sky was strange, filled with smoke and light from the alien ships. She could hear explosions in the distance, feel the ground shake beneath her feet. But the shelter was still there, hidden in the hills outside the city, covered by trees and forgotten by time. Inside, she found others. Neighbors who remembered the old stories. Families who had packed bags like she had. An old man who had been a child during the war decades ago, who knew these tunnels like the back of his hand. Welcome, the old man said. His name was Bong. His back was bent with age, but his eyes were sharp. We have water and food for 2 weeks. Maybe 3 if we are careful. 2 weeks, Hana repeated. Do you think we will need that long? Bong smiled sadly. I do not know. When I was young, we thought the war would last weeks. It lasted years. We learned to survive 1 day at a time. That is all anyone can do. Hana nodded. She set down her bag and looked around at the faces in the shelter. Children, parents, grandparents, all of them scared. All of them hoping for something they could not name. She was a teacher. Her job was to help people learn. Maybe that job had not ended just because aliens had come from the sky. Let me help, she said to Bong. Tell me what needs to be done. In the sky above Seoul, Tae had discovered something important. He had been fighting for hours, dodging beams, watching friends die, firing missiles that did nothing. His fuel was running low. His ammunition was almost gone. Soon he would have to land, if there was still a place to land. But before that happened, he wanted to try something. The Valkyrie ships had shields. Everyone knew that. Missiles exploded against them without causing damage. Bullets bounced off them like rain off a window. Nothing Earth could break through. But Tae had noticed something strange. When the ships fired their weapons, their shields flickered. Just for a moment. Just for a fraction of a second. The energy needed for the attack seemed to weaken the energy protecting the ship Dodd. It might mean nothing. The shields might still be strong enough to stop anything Earth could throw at them. But it was something. A tiny crack in the armor of the gods. I need 3 pilots, Tae said into his radio. Volunteers only. This might not work. 3 voices answered. 3 pilots who were still alive, still flying, still fighting despite everything. Follow me, Tae said. We are going to test a theory. He flew toward the nearest ship. It was smaller than the others, maybe a support vessel or scout. Its shields glowed faint blue in the morning light. When it fires, we attack, Tae explained. Not before, not after. The exact moment its beam is active. That is suicide, one pilot said. We will be in the path of the weapon. No, we come from the side. The beam fires downward. We attack from the horizontal. We have maybe half a second while the shields are weak. Half a second is not much time. Then we better not miss. They waited. Tae watched the ship, saw the glow building at its base. The weapon was charging, preparing to fire at some target on the ground. Soldiers maybe, or civilians who had made the mistake of drawing attention. Now, Tae said .4 jets screamed toward the ship. 4 pilots fired every weapon they had left. Missiles and bullets flew through the air like angry hornets. The beam fired. The shields flickered. 3 missiles hit the shield and exploded harmlessly. But 2 got through. They struck the hull of the alien ship and detonated. The explosion was small compared to the size of the vessel. A scratch on a giant. But it was damage. Real damage. The first damage any human weapon had done to the invaders. It worked, Tay breathed. It actually worked. Alarms screamed in Admiral Dravok's command chamber. Red lights flashed. Officers shouted reports at each other. One of their scout ships had been hit. Not destroyed, not even seriously damaged, but hit. How is this possible? Vesa demanded. Their weapons cannot penetrate our shields. Dravok stared at the damage report. A tiny hole in the hull. A few systems damaged. Nothing significant. But it should have been nothing at all. They learn, he said quietly. They adapt. They found the weakness in our shield cycling. What do we do? Increase shield power during weapons discharge. It will reduce our rate of fire, but it will close the gap they found. The orders went out. Within minutes, every Veltari ship had adjusted its systems. The tiny window Tay had discovered closed, but word had already spread. Pilots around the world had heard about the attack. They had heard that the aliens could be hurt. They had heard that the shields were not perfect. The Veltari were not gods. They could bleed dot on the ground. Soldiers fighting in the ruins of cities heard the news. Citizens hiding in basements heard the news. Leaders in bunkers heard the news. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity had hoped. General Wu received the report from Tay directly. He listened to the young pilot describe his attack, his observations, his theory about the shields. When Tay finished, Wu sat in silence for a long moment. "You did well," he finally said. "You found a crack in their armor. Now we need scientists to make that crack bigger. Sir, there is a research team at the university. They study energy shields for military applications. They might be able to help. Give me the names. I will contact them. One name in particular, sir. Dr. Nari. She is the best." Wu made a note. "Get some rest, pilot. Land your jet and eat and sleep. We will need you again soon. With respect, sir, I will rest when the battle is over." "That is an order, Lieutenant. You are no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion. Rest. That is how you serve your country right now." Tay wanted to argue. He wanted to keep flying, keep fighting, keep searching for weaknesses. But Wu was right. His hands were shaking. His vision was blurry. His body was failing, even as his spirit burned bright. "Yes, sir," he said. "I will rest." He landed his jet on a runway scarred by alien fire. Technicians rushed to refuel and rearm the aircraft. Tay climbed out of the cockpit and nearly fell. Strong hands caught him. "Easy, brother," a voice said. "You have done enough for one day." Tay looked up. It was Captain J, a pilot from another squadron. His face was covered in soot, and his uniform was torn, but he was alive. "How many did we lose?" Tay asked. Jay's expression darkened. "Too many. But more than expected survived. Your trick with the shields, it spread fast. Pilots are learning, adapting, just like you said. It is not enough. Even with the trick, we cannot win. Their weapons are too strong. Their ships are too big. Maybe, but we are still fighting. That counts for something." Tay let Jay lead him to a makeshift rest area. Cots had been set up in what used to be a maintenance hangar. Pilots and ground crew lay sleeping, their faces pale and exhausted. Tay collapsed onto a cot. His body screamed for rest. His mind would not stop racing. Somewhere up there, the Veltari were adjusting their tactics. closing the gaps, learning about humanity just as humanity was learning about them. This was Dr. Nari had not slept in 3 days. Her laboratory, hidden beneath the ruins of the university, was filled with stolen equipment and salvaged technology. Screens covered every wall, showing data she barely understood and equations that made her head hurt. But she was close. She could feel it. The Valkyrie shield technology was beautiful in its complexity. It created a barrier of energy that could absorb almost any attack. Missiles, bullets, even nuclear weapons would simply vanish into that wall of light. Almost any attack. Not every attack. Nari had studied the data from Pilot Tay's discovery. The shields weakened during weapons fire. That was useful, but not enough. The Valkyrie had already corrected that flaw. The window of vulnerability was now too small to exploit, but there had to be another weakness. Every system had limitations. Every technology had flaws. Nari just had to find them. She looked at her team. 5 scientists, all exhausted, all terrified, all brilliant. They had volunteered to stay when the invasion began. They had watched colleagues die, buildings burn, and the world they knew collapse around them. Yet they kept working. "Tell me again about the shield frequency," Nari said to her assistant, a young man named Sue. Sue pulled up the data. "The shields operate on a rotating frequency pattern. It cycles through thousands of variations per second. That is why all weapons cannot find a consistent target. But the cycling requires energy. Enormous amounts of energy. Yes, the power source must be incredible." Nari nodded slowly. She had been thinking about power. The Valkyrie ships were large, but not impossibly large. They had to carry weapons, soldiers, supplies, and the equipment needed for conquest. How much space was left for power generation? What if we could overload the cycling? She wondered aloud. Force the shields to change frequency faster than their power source can handle. How would we do that? I do not know. Yet. She turned to another screen. "Show me the frequency data again. All of it. Every reading we have collected." The data filled the screen. Numbers and patterns and waves of energy, recorded during every battle of the past 3 days. Nari stared at it until her eyes burned. Then she saw it. "There," she said, pointing at a tiny irregularity in the pattern. "Do you see that?" Sue squinted. "A gap in the cycling. It lasts for maybe 2/100ths of a second. Not a gap. A reset point. The frequency pattern has to return to baseline before starting the next cycle. It happens every 4.7 seconds. That is still too fast for our weapons to target. For missiles, yes. For bombs, yes." Nari smiled for the first time in days. "But not for electromagnetic pulses. Not for targeted radio waves. If we can hit that exact frequency at that exact moment, we might be able to crash the entire shield system." Sue stared at her. "You want to hack their shields?" "I want to break their shields, completely, all at once." She started writing calculations on a nearby board. "Get me everything we have on electromagnetic weapons. And contact General Wu. I need military resources. A lot of them." Miles away, Hana had become a leader in the shelter community. The old man Bong had the wisdom of experience, but his body was too weak for the physical work of survival. The younger adults looked to Hana for guidance. She organized supply runs. She created schedules for water and food distribution. She taught the children, keeping their minds occupied while the world burned above them. But she knew the shelter could not last forever. The food would run out. The water would run out. Eventually, they would have to face whatever was waiting outside. News came through an old radio that Bong had kept hidden for decades. The signal was weak and filled with static, but they could hear voices. Other survivors. Other shelters. Other people who refused to surrender. "The aliens have landed ground troops," the radio reported. They are searching for resistance fighters. Stay hidden. Stay quiet. Trust no one you do not know. Hannah listened to the broadcasts every night. She learned that pockets of resistance existed all over the country, all over the world. Humans were fighting back in ways the aliens had not expected. Ambush, traps, sabotage. The Velthari were stronger, but humans were clever. And humans were very, very angry. I want to help, Hannah told Bong one evening. I cannot just sit here and wait. You are helping. You are keeping these people alive. Others are fighting. Others are risking their lives to push back against the invaders. I should be with them. Bong studied her for a long moment. His old eyes saw more than most people realized. Your brother is a pilot, he said. You told me this. Yes. He fights with jets and missiles. That is his way. But there are other ways to fight. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. Do you know what this is? Hannah looked at it. A simple radio transmitter, old and battered. I was a communications officer during the war, Bong explained. I was too young to fight, but I could send messages. I helped to coordinate resistance cells across the country. Information was our weapon. You think I should do the same? I think you are a teacher. You know how to explain things. You know how to make people understand. He pressed the transmitter into her hands. The resistance needs more than soldiers. It needs organizers, planners, people who can connect the scattered pieces and make them work together. Hannah looked at the device. It was so small, so simple. But Bong was right. Information had power. Communication had power. If she could help the resistance coordinate, she could save more lives than any single soldier. Teach me, she said. Bong smiled. I thought you would never ask. In the ruins of Seoul, Velthari ground troops moved through the streets. They were tall creatures, covered in armor that gleamed like dark metal. Their weapons hummed with energy. Their faces were hidden behind helmets that showed nothing human. Sergeant Roth led his squad of 10 soldiers through the debris. He had been fighting for 2 days straight, sleeping in burned-out buildings, eating whatever he could find. His uniform was torn and dirty. His rifle was almost out of ammunition, but he was still alive. And he was still fighting. Movement ahead, whispered one of his soldiers, a young woman named Yuna. Roth held up a hand. The squad stopped, pressing against walls and hiding behind rubble. They watched as a patrol of Velthari soldiers marched past, their boots making heavy sounds on the broken concrete. Too many, Roth murmured. Let them pass. The aliens moved down the street and disappeared around a corner. Roth waited 5 minutes before signaling his squad to continue. This was how humans fought now. Hide and wait. Strike when possible. Disappear before retaliation. It was not glorious. It was not heroic. But it was effective. Every Velthari soldier killed was one fewer enemy to face. Every supply convoy ambushed was one fewer delivery of weapons and equipment. Every communication tower destroyed was one more gap in alien coordination. Small victories. Tiny cuts. But enough cuts would make any enemy bleed. Sergeant, Yuna said, I am receiving a transmission. Encrypted resistance channel. Play it. A voice came through the radio, distorted but clear enough to understand. It was a woman's voice, calm and precise. This is Coordinator Hannah. All units in Seoul Sector, we have identified a target of opportunity. Velthari Supply Depot at the old stadium. Lightly guarded. Strike window opens at midnight. Teams that can participate respond with confirmation code. Roth looked at his exhausted squad. They needed rest. They needed food. They needed a moment to breathe, but the resistance needed soldiers. Confirm participation, he said into the radio. Team 7 is in. The response came immediately. Team 7 confirmed. Coordinates and approach routes being transmitted now. Good luck. Roth studied the data appearing on his tactical display. The stadium was 3 kilometers away. The guards were minimal. The supplies inside could feed and arm dozens of resistance cells. Rest for 4 hours, he told his squad. Then we move. Tonight, we hit them hard. Above the planet, Admiral Dravik received reports from his ground commanders. The news was not good. We have lost over 200 soldiers in the last day, Vesa informed him. The humans are using guerrilla tactics. They strike and vanish before our forces can respond. 200 soldiers is nothing, Dravik said. We have millions more. It is not the numbers that concern me, Admiral. It is the pattern. The humans are becoming more organized. Their attacks are more coordinated. They are learning to work together. Dravik turned to look at the planet below. Earth hung in space like a blue and green jewel, beautiful despite the fires burning across its surface. They are using radio communications, Vesa continued. Old technology, but effective. Our jamming systems were designed for advanced communications networks. These primitive signals slip through our countermeasures. Can we adapt our jamming? It will take time. The frequency ranges are vast, and the humans are smart about varying their transmissions. Dravik considered this. The Velthari Empire had conquered 300 worlds. On most of those worlds, resistance had collapsed within days. The populations, used to modern technology, had been helpless once their systems were disabled, but humans were different. They had developed technology slowly, over thousands of years. They remembered how to live without computers. They remembered how to fight without satellites and drones. That knowledge, passed down through generations, was now their greatest weapon. Increase ground forces, Dravik ordered. Tay stood in the briefing room, looking at the mission that would probably kill him. The plan was insane. A small team would infiltrate the Velthari flagship, plant explosives near the main power core, and escape before detonation. At the same time, Dr. Nari would activate her MP device, shutting down the shields of every alien ship in range. With the shields down and the flagship damaged, Earth's combined forces would launch a massive counterattack. That was their one chance. Their only chance. The insertion will be the hardest part, General Wu explained. We have captured one Velthari dropship. It is damaged, but our engineers have made it functional. You will fly it up to the flagship and pretend to be returning from patrol. Will their sensors not detect humans inside? Asked Lieutenant J, who had volunteered for the mission. Dr. Nari has developed a signal scrambler. Dr. Nari has developed a signal scrambler. It will fool their sensors for approximately 3 minutes. That should be enough time to dock and enter the ship. And then what? Tay asked. We fight through an army of aliens to reach the power core? Wu smiled slightly. You will not fight through anything. You will hide. He pulled up a schematic on the screen. Our intelligence has identified maintenance tunnels throughout the flagship. They are too small for Velthari soldiers, but humans should fit. You will crawl through these tunnels until you reach the power core. Tay studied the schematic. The tunnels looked tight and dark, full of turns and junctions where one wrong choice would lead to death. But Wu was right. They offered a path that avoided direct combat. How much time do we have after planting the explosives? Jay asked. 5 minutes. The timers cannot be set for longer without risking detection. 5 minutes to get back through the tunnels, reach the dropship, and escape. Jay shook his head. That is very tight. Yes, Wu agreed. It is. I will not pretend this mission is safe. The chances of survival are low. That is why I asked for volunteers only. Tay looked around the room. 5 other soldiers had volunteered. All of them knew they might not come back. All of them had decided to go anyway. When do we leave? Tay asked. Tonight. Dr. Nari's device will be ready by midnight. The attack begins at 010 hours. We will be ready. Wu nodded slowly. He looked old in that moment, weighed down by the responsibility of sending young people to their deaths. But his voice was steady when he spoke. I wish I could go with you. I wish I could fight beside you. But my place is here, coordinating the counterattack. Know that all of Earth will be watching. Know that your sacrifice, if it comes to that, will not be forgotten. Tay saluted. The others followed. For Earth, they said together. For Earth, Wu repeated softly. In the shelter, Hana coordinated the resistance from her small radio station. Messages flowed through her constantly, reports from cells all over the country. She had become the central node in a web of communication, connecting fighters who had never met, organizing attacks that spanned entire regions. Tonight was different. Tonight, everything had to work perfectly. All units confirm readiness, she broadcast. Operation Blackout begins at 010 hours. Primary targets are Valkyrie communication towers. Secondary targets are power generators for ground forces. Tertiary targets are supply depots. Confirmations came back one by one. Dozens of teams, hundreds of fighters, all synchronized to strike at the same moment. Coordinator Hana, a voice came through her earpiece. It was General Wu himself. The infiltration team is deploying. Activation in 3 hours. Understood, General. Ground forces are ready. Your brother is leading the infiltration team. Hannah's hands froze over her equipment. She had known Tay was still fighting. She had heard about his exploits, his bravery, his refusal to give up. But she had not known he would be part of this mission. He volunteered, Wu continued. I could not stop him. I would not have expected you to. Hana's voice was steady, even though her heart was breaking. He is doing his duty. I will do mine. You are both extraordinary. Your parents would be proud. Thank you, General. I will see this through to the end. The communication ended. Hana sat in silence for a moment, thinking about her brother flying toward almost certain death. Then she pushed the thoughts aside and returned to work. There would be time for grief later. Right now, there was a war to win. The stolen dropship lifted off from a hidden runway, climbing through the smoke-filled sky toward the stars. Inside, Tay and his 5 teammates checked their equipment one final time. Explosives, detonators, weapons, signal, scramblers. Approaching flagship, the pilot announced. Beginning identification transmission. They had recorded Valkyrie communication codes from captured equipment. The codes were old, possibly outdated, but they were all Earth had. Seconds passed. Then minutes. The flagship grew larger in the viewport, a massive structure of dark metal and glowing lights. It was the size of a city, bristling with weapons that could destroy continents. Receiving docking clearance, the pilot said, surprise in his voice. They bought it. We are in. The dropship entered a hangar bay and settled onto the deck. Through the small windows, Tay could see Valkyrie soldiers moving around other ships, loading supplies, performing maintenance. None of them paid attention to the newly arrived vessel. 3 minutes on the scrambler, Tay reminded everyone. Move fast. They exited the dropship quickly, staying low, heading for the nearest maintenance access point. The Valkyrie ignored them, apparently convinced by the false sensor readings that showed no human presence. Tay found the access panel and opened it. The maintenance tunnel beyond was exactly as the schematic had shown. Dark and narrow, barely large enough for a human to crawl through. I will go first, he said. Follow my path exactly. No mistakes. He climbed into the tunnel and began to crawl. The journey through the flagship's maintenance system took over an hour. The tunnels were hot and filled with strange smells. Tay's arms and legs ached from crawling. His uniform was soaked with sweat. Several times, he heard Veltari voices through the walls, alien words he could not understand. But he kept moving. They all kept moving. Failure was not an option. Finally, they reached the power core chamber. Tay peered through a grate and saw it below, a massive sphere of pulsing energy, surrounded by control panels and monitoring equipment. A handful of technicians worked nearby, but there were no guards visible. "Explosives ready," Jay whispered. "Wait for my signal." Tay watched the technicians. They moved in patterns, checking readouts, adjusting controls. There was a rhythm to their work. If he timed it right, he could place the explosives while they were looking away. Now, the team dropped from the ceiling. The technicians turned, surprised, reaching for alarms. But humans were faster, quicker. Before any alarm could be triggered, the technicians were subdued with stun weapons borrowed from captured Veltari equipment. 30 seconds to place explosives, Tay ordered. Go. They worked frantically, attaching charges to the power core support structures. The sphere hummed above them, generating enough energy to power the entire flagship. When the explosives detonated, that energy would tear the ship apart from the inside. Charges set. 5-minute timer starting. Now. Everyone back to the tunnels. Move. They ran. Behind them, the timer counted down. On Earth, Dr. Nari stood before her empathy device. It was an ugly thing, built from salvaged equipment and desperate innovation. But if her calculations were correct, it would change the war. All teams report ready, General Wu announced over the communication channel. Dr. Nari, you may proceed. Nari looked at her team. Sue, the others. All of them had worked without rest to reach this moment. Beginning activation sequence, she said. She pressed the button. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the device hummed to life, building power, generating the precise electromagnetic pulse she had designed. The hum grew louder. The lights flickered. The air itself seemed to vibrate with energy. And then the pulse fired. It was invisible to the naked eye, but its effects were immediate. Across the sky, Veltari ships flickered. Their shields, which had seemed invincible, suddenly vanished. The blue glow that surrounded them faded away, leaving naked metal exposed to the cold of space. It worked, Sue whispered. It actually worked. On the flagship, Admiral Dravik watched in horror as every warning system activated at once. His shields were gone. His ship was defenseless, and somewhere in the heart of his vessel, a timer reached 0. The explosion tore through the power core, releasing all its stored energy in a single devastating moment. The flagship shuddered. Lights failed. Gravity fluctuated. Secondary explosions rippled through the structure as damaged systems cascaded into failure. Dravik was thrown from his feet. He hit the deck hard, tasting blood. Around him, his officers screamed and died as the bridge collapsed. This was impossible. This could not be happening. The Veltari had conquered 300 worlds. They did not lose. They did not fall. But they were falling now. Tay and his team had almost reached the dropship when the explosion hit. The shockwave threw them against the tunnel walls. Fire and debris filled the narrow passages. Keep moving, Tay shouted. We can still make it. They crawled and stumbled through the chaos. Behind them, the flagship was dying. Ahead, their escape waited. Jay fell. His leg was injured, caught by falling debris. Go without me, he gasped. I will only slow you down. No one gets left behind. Tay grabbed Jay's arm and pulled him forward. Move, that is an order. They dragged themselves through the last section of Tunth. Battle for Earth lasted 7 more days. Without their shields, the Veltari ships became targets instead of predators. Human pilots hunted them across the sky, firing missiles that finally struck true. Human ships closed in from every ocean, their weapons tearing through alien armor that had once seemed invincible. On the ground, the fighting was even fiercer. Valkyrie soldiers, cut off from their commanders on the destroyed flagship, fought with desperate fury. But they were outnumbered now. Every human who could hold a weapon joined the battle. Farmers and teachers, factory workers and office clerks, children old enough to carry ammunition. Children old enough to carry ammunition. Elders too frail to fight, but willing to cook meals and tend wounds. Earth had become a world of warriors. Tay flew mission after mission, barely sleeping, barely eating. His jet had been repaired and refueled so many times that almost none of the original parts remained. But it still flew. He still flew. The Valkyrie ships fell one by one. First the smaller vessels, the scouts and transports. Then the medium-sized warships, each one taking dozens of missiles to bring down. Finally, only the largest carriers remained. Their crews fighting to the last, even as their hulls burned around them. On the 7th day, the last Valkyrie ship crashed into the Pacific Ocean. The invasion was over. Humanity had won. The celebration that followed was unlike anything in human history. People poured into the streets of every city still standing. They hugged strangers. They wept with joy. They stared up at the sky that was finally, truly theirs again. General Wu addressed the world from the ruins of Seoul. His uniform was torn. His face was lined with exhaustion. But his voice was strong. "People of Earth," he said, "we have achieved the impossible. We have faced an enemy with technology beyond our understanding and weapons beyond our imagination. We were supposed to surrender. We were supposed to kneel. We were supposed to become slaves." He paused, looking into cameras that broadcast his words to every corner of the planet. We refused. We fought. We bled. We died. And in the end, we won. Not because we were stronger. Not because we had better weapons. But because we are human. Because we do not give up. Because we would rather die on our feet than live on our knees. Cheers erupted around the world. Wu waited for them to fade before continuing. But our victory comes with a price. Millions of our brothers and sisters are gone. Cities lie in ruins. The scars of this war will take generations to heal. We must honor their sacrifice by building a better world. A united world. A world that will never again be surprised by enemies from the stars. He straightened his back, his old eyes bright with determination. And we must send a message. The Valkyrie Empire thought we were weak. They thought they could crush us without effort. They were wrong. Let every being in this galaxy know what happens when you threaten Earth. Let them understand that humanity will never be conquered. We protect our home. The broadcast ended. But the message had only begun. Hana emerged from her shelter for the first time in weeks. The sunlight hurt her eyes. The air smelled of smoke and destruction. But she was alive. Her people were alive. The war was over. Bong walked beside her, his old legs struggling on the rough ground. "You did well," he said. "Your coordination saved thousands of lives. I only connected the pieces. The fighters did the real work. Do not underestimate what you achieved. Wars are won by soldiers, but they are organized by people like you. Without organization, bravery is just noise." Hannah thought about all the messages she had sent, all the operations she had coordinated, all the teams she had guided to their targets. She had never fired a weapon, but she had helped shape the resistance into a force that could win. Maybe that counted for something. "What will you do now?" Bong asked. "Find my brother. He survived the flagship mission. I heard the reports. I want to see him, and after that..." Hannah looked at the sky. The clouds were returning, covering the blue expanse that had seemed so hostile just days ago. Now it was just the sky again. Just home. I was a teacher before the war, she said. I suppose I will be a teacher again. We have a lot of children who need to learn. About history. About courage. About what humans can do when they stand together. Bong smiled. That sounds like an important job. Every job is important now. We have a world to rebuild. Tay landed his jet for the final time and walked across the airfield toward the command center. His body ached. His mind was foggy with exhaustion, but his heart was full. They had done it. Against all odds, they had done it. He found Hannah waiting for him outside the center. She looked thinner than he remembered, her face marked by stress and sleepless nights. But her eyes were the same, bright, strong, alive. Brother, she said, sister. They embraced. For a long moment, neither spoke. Words were not enough to express what they felt. The fear, the hope, the relief, the grief for those who had not survived. I thought I lost you, Hannah finally whispered. When I heard about the flagship mission, I thought you were gone. I almost was. Several times. Tay pulled back to look at her. But I made a promise. I said I would come back to you. You always keep your promises. Not always. But I kept this one. They walked together through the ruins of the base, stepping over debris, passing soldiers and civilians who nodded in respect. Everyone knew what Tay had done. Everyone knew what Hannah had done. They were heroes now, part of the story that would be told for generations. What happens next? Tay asked. We rebuild. We prepare. The Velthri were just one empire. There may be others. We need to be ready. Do you think they will come back? The Velthri? Hannah considered the question. Their fleet is destroyed. Their soldiers are captured or dead. But empires do not die easily. They may seek revenge. Or they may fear us now. It is hard to say. Either way, we will be ready. Yes, we will. In her laboratory, Dr. Nari reviewed the data from the battle. The EMP device had worked perfectly. The shield technology was now understood. Human scientists could begin developing their own versions, their own improvements. Earth would never be defenseless again. Doctor, Sue said, entering the room. You are being summoned to the World Council. They want to discuss the future of our research. The future? Yes. Now that we understand Velthri technology, the Council wants to know what else we can create. Shields of our own. Better weapons. Ships that can travel between stars. Nari thought about the possibilities. For centuries, humanity had dreamed of reaching the stars. That dream had nearly become a nightmare when the stars reached for them first. But now, with alien technology to study and human ingenuity to apply, the dream could become reality. Tell the Council I will be there within the hour, she said. And tell them to prepare for a long meeting. The future is going to take a lot of planning. Weeks passed. Earth began to heal. Buildings rose from rubble. Fields were replanted. Factories resumed production. The world that had been broken by war slowly put itself back together. But something had changed. The old divisions that had separated nations and peoples seemed smaller now, less important. Humans had faced extinction together, and they had survived together. That shared experience bound them in ways that politics never could. A united Earth government formed, not through conquest or coercion, but through mutual agreement. Leaders from every nation sat at the same table, making decisions for all of humanity. There were disagreements, of course, arguments and debates and compromises. But there was also cooperation on a scale never seen before. The first human starship launched 3 years after the invasion. It was built from salvaged Velthri technology combined with human innovation. Its mission was simple: explore, learn, Prepare. Tay was on board, now a commander instead of a pilot. Hana stayed on Earth, running a school that taught children about the history of the war and the importance of unity. Nari led the research division that would develop humanity's next generation of technology. They were not the only heroes of the war. There were thousands of other soldiers and scientists and ordinary people who had done extraordinary things. But they were part of the story, part of the message that Earth had sent to the galaxy. That message had been received on distant worlds. Species that had been conquered by the Velthari heard what had happened to Earth. They heard that a primitive planet had defeated the Empire's fleet. They heard that humans had refused to surrender, and they began to hope. On one such world, a group of rebels gathered in a hidden cave, listening to a broadcast that had traveled across light years to reach them. "We protect our home," the human voice said. "We do not kneel. We do not break. We fight until our last breath, and then we fight some more." The rebels looked at each other. They were weak. They were outnumbered. They had been beaten down for generations. But if humans could win against the Velthari, maybe they could too. "It is time," their leader said. "We have hidden long enough. We have been slaves long enough. Let us show the Empire what we learned from Earth." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. Uprisings began on a dozen worlds, then 24, then 100. The Velthari Empire, weakened by its defeat at Earth, could not respond fast enough, could not crush every rebellion. The old order was crumbling. A new age was beginning, and at the center of it all, like a beacon of hope in 2H,